You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, the never-ending rainy season, we report from South Sudan at the front line of the climate crisis. How nuclear fusion could play a major role in our clean energy future. And flying high around Britain to tackle the climate crisis, we speak to conservationist Sasha Dench ahead of her world record challenge. Hello there and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show, where we track the changes that are happening to our world right now and meet those who are coming up with the solutions. Now, South Sudan is just 10 years old, but its early years have been difficult ones. A civil war only ended last year, and more than half the population face acute food insecurity. Well, now climate change has become the most pressing challenge. The UN says 1.6 million people have been affected by flooding. Our Africa correspondent John Sparks reports from Bor County.
They say water is a blessing in South Sudan, but the people who live here have never experienced anything like this. Vast areas lie underwater after 2 years of unprecedented flooding, with crops and fields and homes for 200,000 covered by an inland sea.
We're following the road north in the direction of Sudan, but there's very little left of the highway. Some of the richest agricultural land in the country, now used by a handful of fishermen.
The majority who lived here in Jonglei State have departed for higher ground, but there are a few stragglers left trying to hang on.
The water is keep on increasing.
It keeps increasing.
It keeps on increasing. This is the only problem we are facing here.
The floodwaters have spread inland from the River Nile, and last year's rainy season never stopped. The UN is now trying to restore an aging dike.
All of this area of South Sudan has changed on the map. So they've lost vast stretches of land, and they've lost areas of land where people were living and farming before.
Many here say the flooding is part of God's plan, but government officials say otherwise.
It is when you have given up of thinking scientifically, that's why you will say it's God. But to us, we say it is a global warming.
Those who remain here eat water lilies and fish in a new world overwhelmed by water. John Sparks, Sky News in South Sudan.
And you can see more from John's time in Bor County. That's on our weekly digital show that will be available on Sky News social channels, our app and website from Saturday morning. Now, for decades, nuclear fusion has been talked about as the ultimate solution to the world's energy needs and, by extension, the climate crisis. It's a limitless source of clean energy without any of the harmful byproducts that are produced by nuclear fission. Well, that's how our nuclear power is produced today. Well, if it sounds too good to be true, that's because the processes involved have always proved too complicated for scientists to replicate at scale. But efforts continue, and this week, a company backed by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos confirmed plans to build its first nuclear fusion plant here in the UK. So what is nuclear fusion all about? Well, here to explain more is Dr. Amy Gandy, Senior Lecturer in Nuclear Materials Engineering at the University of Sheffield. Dr. Gandy, good to talk to you. Could you just explain to us how this works?
Well, the general concept with fusion is that we're trying to force really small particles together. And when you can force these particles together, they actually fuse. And when they fuse, they generate new particles. And these new particles have an awful lot of energy associated with them. And we can harness that energy to generate electricity.
What stops it from being scalable?
Well, we can, at the moment, achieve fusion. So we can create these fusion plasmas. So this is where we're heating our small particles together to 10 times hotter than the sun. So they become a gas-type state called plasma. And this allows them to be affected by magnetic fields. And this means we can fuse these particles together, even though they're at really high temperatures. So we can actually achieve that, even though it sounds quite incredible. The challenge at the moment is the fact that we have to put so much energy in compared to how much energy we get out. So this is one of the main challenges that all of these new reactors that are in development are going to be built around the UK and around the world are trying to solve. So these are the main challenges.
And if we overcome those challenges, how much of our energy do you think it could create?
Well, fusion reaction, if we're thinking about it en masse by the amount of fuel that we need, can generate 1,000,000 times more energy than burning fossil fuels. So it can generate an awful lot of energy. And as you said at the beginning, it won't produce the same levels of radioactive waste that we have at the moment for nuclear fission. The fuels that we use are readily available. So they are things like lithium and things that we can get from water. So the isotopes of hydrogen, so deuterium and tritium. So they're readily available, and obviously water is a never-ending supply. And also fusion is inherently safe. So we can't have a runaway chain reaction like you would with nuclear fission. The technology is essentially completely the opposite. It's a different type of physics.
It's been fascinating talking to you, Dr. Amy Gandhi. Thank you. Now, let's bring you some more of today's climate news now. And it might seem strange, given the thunderstorms and the rain that we've been seeing across the UK today, but weather warnings for extreme heat have been launched after a record-breaking number of heatwave deaths were recorded in England last summer. Public Health England recorded 2,256 excess all-cause deaths during 3 periods that were officially classed as heatwaves last summer, the highest number since its records began in 2004. There are worries that the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow later this year is headed for failure following little progress in 3 weeks of preparation discussions. One obstacle to progress is the failure by wealthy countries to deliver on their promise to deliver climate finance to less developed countries. There are also questions over whether some countries' delegates will be able to attend COP26 at all, with many poorer nations unable to access vaccines after supplies were bought up by richer countries. Now, one for the fashionistas. Gucci has developed a vegan alternative to leather made with 77% plant-based materials. It's named Demetra in reference to the Greek goddess of harvest. The luxury brand's vegan leather contains viscose and wood pulp compounds that are sourced from sustainable managed forests. Now, there are all sorts of ways to raise awareness about climate change, and one person hoping to inspire change is Sasha Dench. Sasha, otherwise nicknamed as the Human Swan, is taking on a challenge that's never been done before. In a bid to break 2 Guinness World Records, she will attempt to fly around the entire coast of Britain in a wind and green electric powered paramotor. The conservationist will use the 3,000-mile journey to meet the people tackling climate change and prove solutions can be found through new ideas. Well, the Human Swan, Sasha, joins me now. Really good to talk to you, Sasha. Looking at these images here, it's quite phenomenal to see you up there in the sky in that contraption. What does it feel like to be flying with the birds?
Well, flying with birds is absolutely amazing. They definitely see you as another bird in the air. They quite often will come and try and fly with you, particularly if you're thermaling, because they'll look for other signs in the air of where there might be updrafts. So that is incredible. But you are obviously hanging from a seat high up in the air, so it can feel also quite fragile.
It sounds absolutely petrifying, if you ask me. Is it dangerous?
I've been doing it for quite a long time. The key thing is really that the thing that flies is the wing part of it. The motor part just keeps you airborne. And yeah, the nice thing is, well, what I love about it is that when you're in the air, you are quite like a bird because you're very attached to the wing. So you can read exactly what the air is doing, and that's the most important thing. And if it all goes really wrong, you have also got a spare parachute in your pocket. But yeah, I've been doing it long enough that actually being up in the sky is a happy place for me.
Oh, well, it looks tremendous. And other than wanting to break a Guinness World Record, you've got a serious mission, though, haven't you, about climate change, Sasha?
Yeah, so there's 2 Guinness World Records. One of them is me putting skin in the game. I do expeditions with migratory birds normally in a petrol-powered paramotor, and I want to see how far you can go switching to electric, ditching the fuel from there. And the second thing, though, is trying to rally the whole country around a different idea of climate change, no longer having it as being this dark cloud on the horizon, a kind of Climageddon, trying to turn it into a big opportunity. There are so many great stories, great people, great ideas around the country where people are taking the climate challenge head on and finding solutions for it. And they're from all sorts of industries. They're from, big industry, they're from farming, they're people doing things locally. And that's what I want to spotlight. I want to see them for myself as well. I would like to be inspired by that and really believe that Britain drove the Industrial Revolution and we really can drive the Green Revolution too. That's the story I'm hoping to be able to tell by stopping and meeting to all these different people around the country.
Well, Sasha Dench, wishing you a very safe flight. We'll keep our eyes up to the sky. Perhaps we might see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, from one intrepid explorer to another, sailor Tobias Carter's work takes him all the way to the Arctic. The eco-adventurer has led teams on several polar expeditions to measure the impact of climate change from the front line. He's hoping to raise greater awareness of the threat facing the natural world.
I'm just a simple citizen concerned, like many, about the future of our planet. Discovering sailing and what's happening to the world, I wanted to take action. We're here to show people the impacts of climate change by the stories of the people, the scientists and the locals that see these impacts firsthand. With our vessel Northabout, we also participate in various research programs to better anticipate and understand climate change. We hope to convince people here in Europe that climate change is not in 50 or 100 years, it's happening now. Greenland is so important to the changes affecting our climate. Climate change isn't this far-fetched idea. People here are seeing firsthand the changes already affecting our world. The one important thing about climate change, it's got to be hope. Society is changing. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's already changing at an incredible pace. And let's change the world together.
All these wonderful adventures today. Well, that is it for today's show. But you can get your climate fix still over the weekend with our podcast. On this week's episode, we're talking to climate scientist Dr. Michael E. Mann about his new book, The New Climate War. That's on ClimateCast, and it's available for you wherever you normally get your podcasts from. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week.